What's up, MMA fans and BS Show fans around the world? Welcome to the BS Show, and we got a big fight to talk about here. Coming up in July, we have Ben Askren fighting Jorge Masvidal, which if there has ever been a classic grappler versus striker, this definitely has to be up there with them. You got Ben Askren, who came into the UFC and just was talking trash to literally every single person, including the president, Dana White, talking smack to every weight class, every fighter, calling them all out, which is great. Then you also have Jorge Masvidal, who, those of you who don't know, started fighting on YouTube with Kimbo Slice. Go look up some of his highlights. The dude is just a brawler. He is a fighter to the core of him. I mean, this dude has fought the who's who in the UFC and in the MMA world and on the streets of Miami. This is definitely going to be a barn burner, as I like to call it. So let's look into this fight a little bit more. We know that Ben Askren's credentials are pretty much 100% wrestling. Huge wrestling pedigree, big-time wrestler, comes from a great camp where he trains with great wrestlers and great strikers as well. So obviously that is his strength, is trying to get the takedown. As his striking showed in his first UFC fight against Robbie Lawler, he is clearly trying to take it to the mat. But what we learned from that fight against Robbie Lawler is he's tough as nails. He can take some pounding. He can take some punches. He can weather the storm, and he can eke it out. And Robbie Lawler has been around the block as well, and he's got great takedown defense. And Ben Askren even took him down and ended up, tapping him. So we clearly know what Ben Askren is going to try to do in this fight. But what I like is the way Jorge Masvidal is looking at this fight. I watched the Joe Rogan podcast with Jorge Masvidal, and Jorge said he wants to break Ben Askren's face. He says that Ben Askren is fake. He says that he talks a ton of smack, and then when you see him in person, he tries to be your best buddy, and he said that he's just as fake can be. So he wants to beat him slowly, and he wants to drag it out till late and just pummel him and break his face, is what he said. So what we know about Jorge Masvidal is he's tough as nails. He's fought the who's who of the MMA world, and he's got great takedown defense. So what's going to give? Something's got to give. But Jorge's last 5 to 10 fights, I mean, this is just all UFC written all over it. He's beaten Darren Till. He lost to Stephen Thompson and Damian Maia to a decision. He stopped Donald Cerrone. He stopped Jake Ellenberger. He beat Ross Pearson. Two other of his losses are Lorenz Larkin and Benson Henderson. He also lost to Ally Quinta. He's beaten James Krause. He's beaten Michael Chiesa, beaten Tim Means. I mean, this guy has just literally fought the who's who in the MMA. I believe all of his losses come from a decision. I don't think he's ever been stopped. I'm looking at his fight history here, and I don't believe he's ever been stopped. Well, it says Rodrigo Dam beat him by a TKO in 2008. But other than that, it's been all decisions according to what I'm looking at. So that just goes to show that Jorge Masvidal's super tough as well. So what is going to give in this fight, like I said earlier? Is Ben Askren going to get Jorge Masvidal to the ground and just wrestle him to death and get a submission? Or is his takedown defense going to be good enough to keep it standing and light Ben Askren up on the feet? That's the question we all want to know. But for Ben Askren, he's fought good strikers in Bellator, and he stands and bangs, and then he takes him to the ground. They say that Ben Askren's wrestling is so good, he makes all-American wrestlers look amateur. That's what they say. So something's going to give here. If I were to pick this fight, and if I were to bet my money on it, I would have to probably go with Jorge Masvidal. I feel like Jorge Masvidal's hands are some of the best hands in the UFC. He's got great boxing. His fluidity with his striking is just on a whole nother level. For him to literally knock out Darren Till cold, for him to go toe-to-toe with Stephen Thompson and lose in a decision, for him to knock out Donald Cerrone, I mean, come on. Some of the best strikers in the UFC he's gone toe-to-toe with, and he's beaten them or he's lost by a narrow decision. So I think if Jorge Masvidal can stop the takedown, and if he can keep it standing, he's just going to piece up Ben Askren so bad that, he's going to tear his face up. But that's a big if, because Ben Askren has shown that he can take damage, he can weather the storm, and he can get it to the ground. So who knows what's going to happen? I know it's a great fight. I like both guys. I personally don't have anything against Ben Askren. I don't have anything against Jorge Masvidal. I think it's a great fight. This one I can just kick my feet up, watch the fight, have a few cold ones with my buddies, and enjoy it. So let me know who you got in the fight. Let me know who your pick is. Let me know how you think they're going to win, when they're going to win, and hopefully this ends up coming to fruition like we think. Let's pray to the MMA gods that nobody gets hurt. Thank you for tuning in.